The search for new life forms extends to the invisible edge of the universe. While some scientists listen for signals of intelligence from beyond our galaxy, we're still discovering new evidence about life on Earth. Investigators are pursuing evidence of a man-ape that's still unclassified by science. Our quest for strange, undiscovered creatures takes us to the four corners of the globe and finally beyond the limits of the Earth. In the skies above Belgium, a high-speed UFO encounter leads to an extraordinary announcement. Is there really a possibility of extraterrestrial contact? More people believe it today than ever before. Join us on a journey of discovery as Reader's Digest's Mysteries of the Unexplained presents Strange Beings and UFOs. We begin with the hunt for a mysterious creature which may be our closest living relative, if it exists at all. This is a cast of its gigantic footprint. Jeff Meldrum, a private anatomist, is one of a handful of investigators around the world who's studying these extraordinary clues. From these tracks and some 1,500 recorded sightings comes a profile of what some call a monster and others a missing link. Its height is estimated at between 6 and 8 feet. Its weight between 280 and 700 pounds. The Indians of the Northwest call this creature Sasquatch. We call it Bigfoot.
People sometimes ask, could a Bigfoot track simply be a big human foot? And the answer is quite simply no, that there are very significant differences between the two. For example, the foot is basically much flatter than is a human footprint. There's no discernible arch, as is found in a human footprint. There are also differences in the way in which the foot moves. In a more ape-like foot, there is greater flexibility through the instep. And I've seen this feature consistently demonstrated in a number of tracks from a number of different and very diverse situations.
New tracks have arrived at Meldrum's lab, along with a home video from a fishing guide named Rich Gear.
Okay, first one, we're going to cast that one. And there's another one right there that's been stepped on by a dog. There's another cast right there. We're headed towards the creek at this point.
A long-time tracker of Bigfoot, Gear had come well prepared. He made casts of the footprints before following them deeper into the woods.
Something moved and then I looked. And there was another down log 30, 40 foot away on the side of the hill. And staring me, sort of bent over, kind of like a linebacker in a football game, head kind of hunched back, looking down around the corner at me, was this furry creature.
According to Gear, the creature then fled into the forest. As it did, it left behind a few strands of body hair.
Okay, how wild. This is unreal.
Gear has sent them along to Meldrum for analysis.
Right there by that footprint. He just pulled some more off.
Sasquatch hair samples have been found throughout the Northwest. Meldrum will have these examined at the university's lab.
Hello, is this Rich Gere? Yes, this is Jeff Meldrum calling. Yes, I received your package. Yes,
Meldrum will soon visit the heart of Bigfoot country to meet Rich Gere as the search for one of nature's most elusive creatures
In
continues.
fact, a colleague of mine and myself would like to come out and...
Centuries ago, the range of mythical animals that existed only by repute was rather different. They were believed to include true monsters that feasted on human blood, especially the blood of virgin girls. Strangest of all these fierce and fabled beasts was the griffin. With the head of an eagle and the body of a lion with wings, it was a creature that was designed to be terrifying. Were creatures like this purely inventions, or was there some kind of evidence for them? Researcher Adrian Mayer now believes that there was.
Legends of monsters often arise in fossil-rich areas. One good example from antiquity is the griffin. The legend began when Greeks made contact with nomads who mined for gold in the vast deserts of Central Asia.
By word of mouth, the myth traveled west along ancient caravan routes.
As more and more Greeks began to go east toward China over these caravan routes to trade for gold, they brought back more and more reports.
She points out that nomads were mining for gold in a region rich with fossil remains of dinosaurs. Centuries later, when fossil hunters journeyed to the Gobi Desert, they recovered 2,000 tons of fossils from one species alone, Protoceratops. It's easy to see how the bones of a real dinosaur could have inspired the fable of the griffin. The large nostril holes in the fossil skull of Protoceratops would be taken to be its eyes. The beak and claws of a dinosaur would be interpreted as wings and talons. It may be then that our ancestors' ideas of monsters were based on real evidence. What about the concrete evidence for Bigfoot?
Well, I've spoken to Rich Gere, who sent me the videotape and casts and other materials. He's found a camp for us here.
In Orleans, California, Jeff Meldrum is joined by Richard Greenwell of the International Society of Cryptozoology, Tucson, Arizona.
As a cryptozoologist, my job is to, well, first evaluate claims, reports of what we call unverified animals and see if we can verify them. And of course, right here in California, we look for Bigfoot. I'm hopeful that this is a real biological phenomenon, we could call it. It's going to be pretty significant for zoology as well as anthropology and as well as society, I think.
The team's first objective is to follow up Rich Gere's recent Bigfoot sighting. A seasoned forest guide, Gere will donate a few days of his time to help them search for new Bigfoot tracks.
Been doing a little scouting around here, and just not too far over the hill is where the actual Patterson sighting was, and there's a nice little sandbar there, and possibly, you know, we might see some things that might get exciting.
You filming your camera, Richard?
Yeah, let's
Hey.
If these investigators do find Bigfoot, it won't be the first time a myth has inspired the search and discovery of a real creature.
Here's an example of a bear paw. Probably a black bear, a real big black bear. And we see the paw mark here, but we haven't seen the bear. And it's kind of the case with Bigfoot. You do see the footprints, but you don't see the Sasquatch itself. But we can see real clearly that.
When we return to the search for Bigfoot, Meldrum and Greenwell will visit a place where Sasquatch left more than a footprint. The search for living monsters has led explorers to the far corners of the world. In Asia, the dragon is a symbol of creation and destruction. But was it always just a metaphor, a sign? In this century, the word dragon would take on an entirely new dimension. In 1926, a wealthy American adventurer named W. Douglas Burden made a 15,000-mile journey to Indonesia. Burden was lured to a volcanic island called Komodo by native reports of large and ferocious lizards. As Burden pushed into unexplored jungles, the island of Komodo seemed like a lost world. After several days of exploration, he set up camp on a 2,000-foot plateau. It was there he encountered a monster, forgotten by time. These are the world's first images of the Komodo dragon. Burden could scarcely believe his eyes.
It is a real dragon, black as dead lava, whose every aspect speaks of infinite existence.
The saliva of the Komodo dragon is so laden with poisonous bacteria, one bite from this monster can be fatal. Komodo dragons weighing in at over 500 pounds can overpower wild pigs and water buffalo. They have also killed and eaten human beings. Burden's film provided indisputable proof that his Komodo dragons were real. But photographic evidence alone is sometimes not enough. In fact, a few years later, a photograph triggered another monster controversy that's still going on. In 1934, an English surgeon named Robert Kenneth Wilson stunned the world with a picture taken from the shores of a lake in Scotland. For decades, people had reported seeing a giant beast swimming in the deep waters of Loch Ness. Wilson claimed to have captured an image of the monster in broad daylight. The photograph was a profile of a huge creature that looked like a dinosaur. Nicknamed Nessie, the Loch Ness monster provoked claims of fraud by some scientists, but was hailed as a breakthrough by believers. Recently, in a deathbed confession, a man who claimed to be part of the famous sighting insisted the entire episode was an elaborate hoax. He claimed the celebrated image captured not the likeness of a monster, but a small wooden model attached to a toy submarine. Wilson himself never recanted his claim. And there are still researchers out looking for proof of Nessie's existence. The old fear of mythical beasts extended beyond the land into the deep ocean. The surface of the sea hides an unknown continent below. Every voyage is a journey over a mystery. What else is down there with the fishes? The ocean's depths are still uncharted territory. There are chasms in the sea 5 miles deep, and we do not know what lives in those dark places. Creatures that can withstand enormous pressures and survive in a world of predators. Unknown monsters.
I think we need monsters. I think we need scary, uncontrollable creatures in the sea or out of the sea, for that matter, to give us the proper sense of humility, to demonstrate to us that we're not really in charge of this planet and we can't do whatever it is we want.
Richard Ellis is the author of several books on the search for new life forms in the sea, many illustrated with his own paintings.
The ocean is the largest single environment on the planet, and the largest part of that single environment is the deep ocean. 90% of that is 2 miles deep. So, every once in a while, some mysterious creature is found. Most of the time they're small, occasionally they're large, but there could be almost anything down there that we simply haven't seen.
Scientists thought the coelacanth had been extinct for 70 million years. Then in 1938, the fish was found. Here was a fossil suddenly brought to life. In 1982, a US naval research sub explored volcanic vents 1.5 miles deep in the Pacific. It discovered tube-like animals who thrive without oxygen or light in temperatures of 500 degrees Fahrenheit. If there can be life here, where is it not possible? While these new finds intrigue Richard Ellis, the monster that's captured his imagination remains elusive.
The giant squid is the most impressive creature on Earth, I think. The largest invertebrate in the world is a creature that gets to be 60 feet long, that has eyes the size of dinner plates, that has a beak, gigantic beak shaped like that of a parrot. In addition to that, it is a gigantic animal that has never been seen alive by any human being. And that, I think, adds tremendously to its mystery.
Not seen by any human being who lived. Human survivors never saw much of their attacker. In 1873, a huge squid attacked 3 fishermen off the coast of Newfoundland. When the creature lashed out with a tentacle, one of the crewmen managed to hack it off with an axe. The fishermen not only escaped with their lives, they also got away with the squid's tentacle, absolute proof of the existence of a true monster of the sea. Recently, the dead body of this giant was hauled aboard an Australian fishing boat. If a beast like this attacked a diver, resistance would be futile. This creature's tentacles are nearly 40 feet long.
And the largest one ever measured was 57 feet long. It washed up in New Zealand in 1948. So we know they get to be that big. Do they get to be any bigger? Maybe.
So far, no one has captured a giant squid alive. But anyone who tries had best be well prepared. Dr. Hanlon studies squid here at the Marine Biological Laboratory on Cape Cod. These squid are only a fraction of the size of their giant cousins, but their stalking techniques are probably the same.
So you're 1,000 feet down, total darkness. You come into the range, the visual range of a giant squid. What happens?
It recognizes you as prey, it detects you, orients towards you, and all of a sudden outshoot these long tentacles. Whap! And it's got you.
Slow motion photography can only hint at the horrors awaiting a diver confronted by a giant squid. Marine researchers hope to find and capture a giant squid in the near future. Until then, Richard Ellis will have to paint his monster from the imagination rather than life. Medford Taylor is a photographer for National Geographic magazine. 10 years ago, he crossed paths with another mysterious creature, one that haunts a world of stone and ice. It was 1985. The first joint Soviet-American mountain climbing expedition was in its second week. Americans and Russians were scaling a series of peaks in the Pamir Mountains of present-day Tajikistan. The story was covered by National Geographic, and Medford Taylor was sent to capture the adventure on film.
Up until this point, I was rather cynical about stories that I'd heard of Bigfoot and Nessie and other such monster stories. And after actually experiencing an incident like this, I began to question my own disbelief. It was during a lull between climbs that I hiked out from the camp some 2-3 kilometers alone to photograph flowers and fauna around the area. And in one of these valleys, late on an afternoon, I came upon this very large footprint, seemingly by a human of some sort, but not one of any size I'd ever encountered.
This is the first time Medford Taylor's photos of the footprint have been revealed to the world.
Not only did I photograph the footprint, but the more I looked at this footprint, the more I realized that I was seeing something strange, something I'd never seen before. This chill came over me. It was cold. It was always cold in that desolate valley, and there was always a slight wind blowing. But even beyond that, I felt this chill. There was obviously some other being around me in this place.
Taylor is certain he was not hoaxed. He had told no one in the base camp where he intended to hike that fateful day.
All I know is that I took the photographs, they're real, and I suppose when people don't understand the reason for something, they walk away from it. And so I suppose for that reason, I put the pictures away in my own file for the last 10 years, and there they've sat. But I still don't have an answer to this.
Unexplained footprints and sightings of ape-like creatures are not confined to Asia. Sightings have been reported in many North American states and Canadian provinces. The most frequent reports come from British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and Northern California.
I get asked quite often if I believe in Sasquatch and Bigfoot, and my answer is usually, and has to continue to be for now, is on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I believe in Bigfoot. And on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I don't. And on Sundays, I rest.
Right, it's beautiful here. Yeah, the vegetation's really lush.
Of all the alleged Bigfoot sightings in the Pacific Northwest, none have matched the incident at Bluff Creek, California. In 1967, two men, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, were determined to bring back proof once and for all that Sasquatch existed. That October, they mounted an expedition to Bluff Creek, a site where scores of footprints had been reported. As they explored the creek bed for tracks, their horses were suddenly spooked. Gimlin stayed behind, but Patterson grabbed his Super 8 camera and raced towards an ape-like form squatting beside the creek. This is the actual scene Patterson shot in 1967. A few seconds of film of what he and Gimlin swore was a living and breathing Sasquatch. Jeff Meldrum believes that if the film is a hoax, it would have required a sophisticated knowledge of primate anatomy, something that Patterson did not possess.
The subject of the Patterson film, for example, walks with a very bent-kneed gait. He's walking very flat-footed. There's a lot of overlap in support between the two limbs.
Another feature that intrigues Meldrum is the way the creature swivels its entire upper body. It's the same way great apes with thick upper necks have to move when looking back in mid-stride.
So the fact that all of these features act in concert, and each time I see the film, new things sort of come to the surface, keeps bringing me back to the film to study it more and more.
Soon the team will break off their search for Bigfoot. Meldrum is anxious to return to Idaho to learn the results of the lab tests on the Bigfoot hair samples recovered by Rich Gere. In the meantime, they know that just beyond the firelight, the very creature they seek could be watching them. If the idea of large, unknown creatures on Earth is disturbing, how much more disturbing is the idea of being watched from the sky? But wouldn't it be even more disturbing to know that the whole of the rest of the universe is simply dead? If the Earth is the only flicker of life, if the universe does not support life, what hope have we? Perhaps that's why there are so many people who believe they have encountered aliens. On every continent, people have reported strange objects in the skies. They're called unidentified flying objects because that's what they are, unidentified. Scientists who maintain that they cannot be alien craft are engaged in arguments just as bizarre as the believers.
This doesn't sound like the kind of thing that a smart alien intelligence would do.
Dr. Paul Horowitz is a Harvard physicist.
The cost of a round trip to the nearest star, using technology we could not conceive of actually building, but which is permitted by the laws of physics, would use $200 billion worth of fuel, would use the US power consumption for 1 million years. I think perhaps the most diplomatic thing one can say is the laws of physics do not prohibit space travel, but the laws of economics, in some sense, really do.
That does, of course, assume that we know how alien life forms power their spaceships. All this is speculative. Photographs of UFOs provide endless material for argument and debate. And UFOs have been tracked by radar operators who should know the difference between weather phenomena and something solid. Richard Hall is chairman of the Fund for UFO Research, a group composed of PhDs from various scientific fields.
The United States does not take UFOs seriously currently. However, there are certain countries like France and China, mainland China, and particularly Belgium, that have had many sightings and do take the subject seriously. In 1990, there were a whole series of radar visual sightings over Belgium involving state-of-the-art jet interceptors, multiple radars. None of this could be explained.
In 1990, the Belgian Defense Ministry, through radar and visual observation, confirmed an outbreak of UFO sightings. At one point, Air Force fighters were sent to intercept the UFOs, which were simultaneously tracked by airborne and ground radars. The Belgian jets locked onto the objects for 5 seconds before the UFOs sped away at speeds that would have killed a human pilot.
It is impossible, even with a stealth aircraft, to accelerate within 1 second from 150 knots till 500 knots. That is for sure, because even the human body would not tolerate such an acceleration.
Thousands of witnesses, including the military and police, reported sighting the UFOs. Consistent drawings of triangular objects were made by people scattered across the region. The sketches were corroborated by eyewitness photos. During this extraordinary press conference, Air Force Colonel Wilfried de Brouwer confirmed the sighting of unidentified flying objects in Belgian airspace. It was the first time a Western government officially admitted that such an encounter had occurred. While military pilots, as well as US and Russian astronauts, have reported UFO sightings, many more have been made by civilians. These are usually much more detailed and much less corroborated.
There's a little sloop sailing north on the river.
Sam Gerard and his wife Alice live along the Hudson River just north of New York City.
The storm is brewing.
Gerard is a retired oceanographer and senior research associate of the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory of Columbia University. Alice is a former school administrator.
I really didn't know anything about UFOs before this incident. I thought they were most unlikely, and I didn't really believe in people who said they'd seen them until I saw one myself.
As a scientist, I was a complete agnostic. If I were to see one, I could then believe in it, but just to hear accounts of their existence was not any scientific proof as far as I was concerned.
On March the 16th, 1996, the Gerards were driving east on Veterans Memorial Highway. At 5:45 p.m., they, and apparently only they, saw a low-flying object through the trees.
We slowed down enough to determine that it was probably neither a helicopter nor a light plane.
Sam and Alice followed the object to Lake Tapan, where they claim it hovered in one position high over the water. Sam made this sketch of a UFO covered with flashing lights.
You could see these lights even though it was a bright sun from the west and back of us.
It looked like a piece of junk jewelry because the lights didn't seem to be arranged regularly. They were sort of bright. They all seemed to me to be like electric light bulbs.
That were in the article in the paper that we...
Sam Gerard has designed instruments that were adapted for use during the Apollo project to the moon. He seems a reliable witness who believes his experience.
I can state unequivocally that this was not a conventional aircraft, nor was it powered by any system that is understood even by people with a high level of understanding of technology.
This pattern of responsible Americans describing incredible UFO sightings began shortly after the Second World War. Clustered around a 2-week period in the late 1940s, reports came in from every state of the Union.
The modern UFO era began in 1947 when Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot over Washington State, sighted a chain of objects skimming along over the mountaintops. And he said that they flew like a saucer does when you skip it across water. And that's the origin of the expression flying saucer.
That was also the year of the Roswell incident, now the most famous encounter in the history of UFO phenomena. In July of 1947, a rancher named Mac Brazel discovered fragments of metallic materials spread over a quarter square mile of his land. It looked like a crash site. The fragments were turned over to officials at the nearby Roswell Army Airfield, home of the 509th Bomber Group in New Mexico, the group that dropped atomic bombs on Japan. Roswell is now a civilian airfield, but for Air Corps veteran Walter G. Hort, it seems like only yesterday when he was summoned into the office of his commanding officer.
Well, that day of July the 8th, 1947, I was given information by Colonel William H. Blanchard, the commanding officer.
Hort, the base's public relations officer, was told by his boss that a flying saucer had crashed just outside of Roswell.
And the release that he wanted me to put out and hand deliver to the 4 local media, in essence, stated that we had in our possession a flying disc. It was being flown to higher headquarters, 8th Air Force in Fort Worth by Major Jesse Marcel, who was our base intelligence officer.
While admitting it had recovered a flying saucer, the military never made any mention of any aliens. But over the years, several airmen stationed on the base have claimed that alien remains were held under tight security in this hangar. A mortician who worked in this Roswell funeral home testified that base personnel inquired about the availability of 4 child-sized coffins. And a nurse at the base hospital apparently claimed to have witnessed surgeons performing an autopsy on beings that could not have been human. She was transferred overseas and has not been traced. Then just a day after the press release, the same officers from the Roswell base denied that any flying saucer had been recovered. According to the revised story, the wreckage found by Mac Brazel was from a weather balloon, not a flying saucer.
I was told by Colonel Blanchard, who I had all the faith in the world in, that we had in our possession a flying disc, and all of a sudden the general overrides it and says it wasn't. It was a weather balloon. I honestly, in my own mind, couldn't visualize Jesse Marcel, Major Marcel, the intelligence officer, making that big a blooper that he wouldn't know a weather balloon from something else, nor would Colonel Blanchard have not known that it was not a weather balloon. This was quite a revelation.
Nearly 50 years later, government officials insist no alien bodies were ever found and no wreckage ever recovered from a UFO crash. In 1994, a non-profit UFO group commissioned a detailed review of the Roswell incident using top-secret documents recently released by the US government. It was prepared by Carl Flock, the former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. His report has shocked many who believe in Roswell.
The project that I believe was responsible for the debris that was discovered by Rancher Mac Brazel, and which led to the announcement of the capture of a flying saucer, was a project codenamed Mogul. And it was classified top secret. It was very sensitive. It was a very high priority project. It was operated by a team from New York University.
Mogul was the code word for an experimental balloon designed to carry equipment high into the atmosphere. Its mission was to detect evidence of Soviet atom bomb tests. According to government records, Mogul balloons were being tested in New Mexico when one of them came down on Mac Brazel's cattle ranch. While Project Mogul explains the strange debris found on a cattle ranch, there is no explanation for the rumors of alien bodies. Carl Flock believes that there probably were bodies, though not necessarily alien ones, and that it's time for the American government to be honest about what really happened at Roswell. In Europe, UFO sightings have been as widespread as anywhere, but the idea of unknown creatures arriving from other planets seemed to take particular hold in the English countryside. Late in the 1970s, startling evidence of possible alien encounters emerged in the form of strange circular patterns on agricultural land. Every summer, more and more of these mysterious circles appeared on crop fields, overnight. Speculation grew that the circles were the result of nocturnal landings by UFOs. Scientists and the media descended on the countryside as the number of crop circles multiplied.
There's a flattening. They're actually lying flat on the ground, like this one here, and these along here, look.
Yeah.
They're flat on the ground while there's others growing up right
That's
again.
right, only in the rain.
Yes.
Over the years, the crop circles evolved from simple designs to elaborate glyph-like symbols. Some theorized that they were in fact extraterrestrial messages. A new branch of UFO study would seek to decipher their meaning. By 1993, the mystery had become a national obsession. But then two men stepped forward and admitted they were the perpetrators of an elaborate joke. Under cover of darkness, using the simplest of tools, they stomped their way into history with a spectacular hoax.
I'm Dave Chorley, this is Doug Barr, and we are the two people that have created the crop circles in 1978 through to today.
We started doing the patterns, and last year we did the first pictogram at the bottom of Cheesefoot Head, and that caused quite a sensation. And since then, the furor's got more and more and more. People from overseas coming over because it's something that's, even away from the circles, it's more and more important, you see. And they're just scratching their heads. They're still scratching their heads 13 years later.
The incident provided the world with some comic relief. But the latest wave of alleged UFO encounters are not so funny. These are sketches of alien abductors made by their victims. Most report being confronted by UFOs emanating bright and paralyzing lights. Others claim to have been abducted from their cars and homes. When they return, they're unable to account for their whereabouts for hours or even days. These people say they're often restrained and subjected to painful physical tests, invasive procedures focused on sexual organs. Some people who claim to have been abducted exhibit round depressions called scoop marks, as if a layer of cells had been surgically removed from their body. Others display long cuts and straight-line gashes. Bud Hopkins has written 2 books on abductions and has interviewed hundreds of abductees.
You get very, very few hoaxes because a person is calling you saying, I don't know what happened to me, I might be losing my mind, I don't want you to call back to my house because I don't want my wife to know that I've talked to you, I don't know what's happening, etc. And they insist on anonymity and so forth. There's hardly the motivation for a hoaxer in that. There's no way that you cover yourself with glory.
I never thought about UFOs. Never really occurred to me at all about even their possibility until I was 17 and it was in my face and there was no way to avoid it.
Chris Hinton is a 42-year-old assistant building contractor in Washington, D.C. He agreed to this interview because he says it might help other victims. Over the course of a week in the summer of 1972, Chris was helping his brother prepare for a driving test. Each night, they claim to have seen several UFOs.
We see a bright light over the horizon just shoot across the sky, lightning speed, and then stop suddenly on a dime. This voice explains, as this light projects off the side of the ship, we're hypnotizing you. And there's no need to be afraid, you just relax. And we are going to communicate telepathically.
Chris's teenage encounter triggered, he says, forgotten memories. Replays of other alien abductions that stretched back to his childhood years.
When I was 4 years old, I had been lost in the woods for several hours. And 2 figures about my size came up, one on either side of me from behind. And they said, "Will you come with us, Chris?" All I saw was a ramp. It looked like a metallic ramp that entered a doorway, and they put me on this table and they clamped my skull into like a vise of some sort. I remember I just couldn't move, and I saw this contraption. It was metallic, and they clamped it firm. I could not move. And they rammed something up the back of my head, and it hurt like the devil. I was screaming. And they packed me up and walked me out of the ship. And I'm running back home.
By 1992, stories like Chris's had become so widespread that a special conference was convened at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to investigate reports of alien abductions. Sponsored by the Fund for UFO Research, it was attended by prominent scientists, people who claim to be abduction victims, and UFO researchers.
That he has to fill them in on.
Studies have been conducted that show that abductees who don't know anything about the UFO subject, they don't know what other people have reported, still will come out with the identical story in exactly the same sequence.
But scientists at the conference wanted hard proof.
We hear tales of people being abducted. We hear heartfelt stories. These people are clearly affected by what they've imagined or seen or something, but we never get a real piece of evidence.
Bud Hopkins believes he's found the kind of evidence scientists are looking for, here in Salt Lake City, Utah. This woman and her son say that they've had an abduction experience. To protect their privacy, they requested we mask their identities.
I was kind of dumbfounded.
They say their ordeal began on a drive home from a family get-together.
And all of a sudden, we were hit by that bright light, just a bright light. That came from nowhere. I couldn't see the road. I knew I was moving. I looked over at him and I told him I can't see the road. And that's the last of my memory.
My recollection is my mother let go of the steering wheel, and at that point, I reached over and grabbed it.
I can't remember going home. I can't remember the next day.
As in many of these cases, memories of intrusive alien surgery began to haunt Joan. A year later, she suffered an accident.
I hit my head on the fireplace, and I was out unconscious for about 45 minutes. I woke up and made it to the phone and called my parents, and they came and took me to the hospital. And they x-rayed my head.
Suspecting, I suppose, a skull fracture,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, but there was no skull fracture, it was fine. But the doctor came running through ER yelling, "How did you get this metal in your head?" Well, I had no idea, neither did my parents. I've never had a head injury to where I could get metal in my brain.
The radiologist's report indicates an oval metallic object of unknown origin is lodged in the parasagittal region of the woman's brain. The official hospital report goes on to state, the appearance is unusual for an artifact, and certainly the pattern would be worthy of pursuit. Skeptics insist that reports of alien abductions are the product of some mass subconscious hysteria. The radiologist's report suggests that here, at least, something else may be going on. UFO researchers do share some common ground with the academic establishment. Just north of Boston, Massachusetts, the billion-channel Extraterrestrial Assay, or BETA project, is an ambitious scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligence. A joint project of Harvard University and the Planetary Society of Pasadena, California, this radio telescope is listening for a signal from outer space. Nearly all objects in space generate various kinds of random radio waves. These waves are monitored by BETA on 250 million channels and translated into red and green spikes. If alien cultures are trying to communicate with other civilizations, a strong radio beacon would be a logical way to say hello. Should BETA spot an unusually strong and steady signal, its powerful computer would peg it as an alien radio beacon. Dr. Paul Horowitz of Harvard University directs the project.
Life elsewhere in the universe, guaranteed. Life elsewhere in our galaxy of 400 billion stars, guaranteed. Intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, guaranteed. Intelligent life elsewhere in our galaxy, so overwhelmingly likely that I'd give you any odds you like. I think the tough part is the intelligent life interested in communicating? Are they sending messages by a method that we can detect in our direction at a power level sufficient for us to detect?
Jeff Meldrum has returned from Bigfoot country to his lab in Idaho. He's back just in time. Preliminary tests on the Bigfoot hair sample have been completed with significant results. The hair strands from Northern California are strikingly similar to alleged Sasquatch samples from other states. DNA studies will soon compare the hair with samples taken from gorillas.
If in fact the DNA compares most closely to the living great apes, then it's strong evidence that Bigfoot is in fact part of a very early ape lineage that gave rise to the modern living apes, such as chimps and gorillas.
The initial results of the DNA tests did confirm that the hair samples from Northern California are of animal, not human origin, and are not of any species known to exist in North America. Some believe we will never find Bigfoot because it doesn't exist. They tell us there are no more mysterious creatures to be found on Earth. And yet we keep finding them. In 1994, a new species of animal is captured in Vietnam. Called the Saula, it's the largest new mammal to have been discovered in the past 50 years. That same year, another deer-like creature, the giant muntjac, is found in nearby Laos. In Antarctica, scientists uncover a meteor from Mars. In 1996, they announced that evidence of long-dead Martian bacteria is embedded in its surface. Life takes many forms, and we are constantly surprised by new ones. There will be more surprises. That's guaranteed. What they will be, we can hardly guess. It's a matter of time and space.